all these Remainers up here, oh dear. Okay, so we're going to go into proper campaign mode. I'm going to start with Kate. And maybe you can comment on today's speech as well.
Sure. Well, I've been on, and I'm sure Suzanne has too, hundreds if not thousands of doorsteps talking about this over recent weeks and months. And I must start by saying I recognise a lot of what Deborah is showing us. It is absolutely right that women are saying they haven't made their minds up, and indeed many men saying that. It is absolutely right that they say repeatedly that they want the facts. I would also say more strongly than Deborah did that a lot of the people I speak to do recognise that whatever their personal views, this is a decision that affects the next generation. It's a decision of huge salience for young people. And one of the things that I think is really important for us who believe in remaining in the European Union to do is to get that sense of our connectedness with the next generation firmly into the campaign, to make a common cause between younger people and older people, that for young people this really matters, but older people want younger people to do well in the future, and their cause is everybody's cause. Labour isn't neutral. Jeremy Corbyn today has made clear that our party is not neutral. As a political party, we don't go around being neutral on the big political questions of the day, and I'm not neutral. I believe and have always believed that we should remain in Europe. But I do recognise the Leave campaign has done better, I think, than the Remain campaign to tell the story, to make the case, and that we have a really big job to do, as Catherine's just said, to show the day-to-day importance of why it matters that we stay in Europe. And I'm not going to sit here and suggest to you that the only way to make that case is to talk about the things that Europe has done for women that you might call, of course, that's a woman's issue. I think that women, every bit as much as men, are concerned about the big questions, the future prosperity of the country, our global influence, peace and security, the environment and the future of our planet. These things are important equally to women and to men. But I do suggest that the advantages, the rights, the protections that have come from the European Union, and that's in the workplace and business, for families, for consumers, as users of public services, I do suggest that the way that Europe has taken forward some of those policies and their development will have a special resonance for women's identity with the issues that affect them, their families and their communities. And I also want to make the geeky point, and Deborah is absolutely right, this debate is overly rational and needs to be more emotional, but as she will also probably recognise, I'm more of a rationalist in politics. I would make the geeky point that the rights have been strengthened because equality is explicit in the EU constitution and governing documents. And the legislative and institutional architecture in Europe is in place, which explicitly underpins and compels a drive towards equality. It's explicit in the Lisbon Treaty, it's explicit in the Charter of Fundamental Rights. Gender mainstreaming is explicitly provided for in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, and institutionally, the European Institute on Gender Equality means that we've got an organisational architecture in place to ensure that what Europe does promotes gender equality. And that means that we already have in place the automatic mechanisms to secure the gender-proofing of the broader advantages of European membership, whether that's in relation to trade or jobs or inward investment or the ability that we have to live and work in other member states or safety and security. But I do think that if we want to make the emotional case, we can start by looking at some of the rights that have a special significance for women. And for example, in relation to employment, it's really important to recognise not just that we have employment rights that are underpinned by legislation, but that the impetus for those rights, the improvement of those rights, has often been because of the European Union. So we have equal pay, we have the UK's Equal Pay Act, but it took Europe, a decision by Europe, to ensure that our equal pay legislation was enhanced and developed, not just to mean that men and women doing the same job were paid equally, but that we have equal pay now for work of equal value. Hugely important development for women. Really important to recognise that it was Europe that gave us the impetus for equal recognition and equal pay, equal status for part-time workers. really important to recognise that many of the rights that we have within UK law, to family leave, to maternity rights, protection for pregnant women, have been driven by rights that have been provided for by Europe, as well as the rights that go to the benefit of both women and men, paid holidays, protection for agency workers and so on. And what these rights mean for our day-to-day lives are that, you know, a mum who wants to take some time out of the workplace, take advantage of flexible working provisions, can do that without fear that her job won't be there for her to go back to. It means that a graduate starting her first job knows that she has the right to be paid the same as her male counterpart. These aren't theoretical rights. There are women on this platform old enough to remember before we had them, and we are not prepared to go back there. And I think there is a serious point to make that being part of a large collective institutional and legal network that requires and protects those rights is an important protection for women in every European country, including this one. We should also recognise the impetus from Europe to tackle violence against women and girls. Cross-border measures like the EU arrest warrant and rules that ensure that restraining orders taken out in the UK by women who've experienced domestic violence will be protected if abusive partners move or travel abroad. And then there are measures like on food safety or health and safety or air quality standards or clean beaches and waterways when you take your kids to the park or to the seaside, and they reassure them, and those standards act to offer an underpinning reassurance that women's well-being and their families' welfare will be protected. We should also notice that there is a framework, a legal framework for enforcing these rights, that ultimately we can take our right to these protections to the European Court of Justice. But all of these rights are looking backwards, I recognise, and I think the really important thing that people want to hear us talking about is what is the importance of Europe to us in the future? Where is it taking us? And a couple of weeks ago I went over to Brussels to meet with women from all the member states to talk about the next development in improving employment rights, particularly for parents, for families. Europe is a dynamic space which acts to bring together the best of the ideas of all the member states, and sometimes we are moving at different speeds within our individual countries, but collectively we can move forward together more fast, more quickly, and more definitely. And I see great potential for women in Europe, women becoming even more assertive in Europe, to drive those economic and social rights forward. And that, I think, is the trick we really have to pull off now, to be talking not about what Europe has done for us, but how collectively we can really progress economically and socially in Europe in the future. And I think women understand all that, as they also recognise the damage that leaving would do to us, the uncertainty that would be created, protracted exit negotiations, the difficulties of unwinding treaties and reinstating rights, the impact on the pound, the greater risk to our security. So in conclusion, Anushka, I would say it's not just self-interest that means women should vote to remain, not just the interests and rights that have been put in place for women, but the fact that what is in women's interests, and I say this in every debate, whatever I'm talking about, what's in women's interests is in the interests of everyone. And I think that when we look at the way that Europe has helped to protect and drive women's rights and women's protections, we can see that it's been good for the economic and social strength of our country, and I will be passionately campaigning to remain, and I believe that that is what women will want to do too.